Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, episode 127.
The learning curve is steep. You're going to make mistakes, and try not to be too hard on yourself.
You're listening to the Grazing Grass Podcast, sharing information and stories of grass-based livestock production utilizing regenerative practices. I'm your host, Cal Hardage. You're growing more than grass. You're growing a healthier ecosystem to help your cattle thrive in their environment. You're growing your livelihood by increasing your carrying capacity and reducing your operating costs. You're growing stronger communities and a legacy to last generations. The grazing management decisions you make today impact everything from the soil beneath your feet to the community all around you. That's why the Noble Research Institute created their Essentials of Regenerative Grazing course to teach ranchers like you easy-to-follow techniques to quickly assess your forage production and infrastructure capacity in order to begin grazing more efficiently. Together, they can help you grow not only a healthier operation, but a legacy that lasts. Learn more on their website at noble.org/grazing. It's noble.org/grazing. On today's show, we have Jessica Newman. She is on sharing about her sheep operation, utilizing Texel sheep, which is a wool breed. We spend most of the episode talking about her sheep. Then we talk a little bit about our Dexter cattle. For the overgrazing section, we discuss the off-the-farm job with the farm and managing that. And for the bonus segment for our Grazing Grass Insiders, we talk about sheep AI. And for those insiders, I'm still trying to get that all going. I apologize it's taken me this long, but we will have it going soon. Before we talk to Jessica, 10 seconds about my farm. We went through our sheep other day to look at them. It's summer, so it gets hot and dry, and that's when some worms or parasite issues showed up. So we went through and checked them, and I wormed a few lambs. And what we did, this is the first time we've done this, trying to keep them separate, but I got an ear notcher, and I ear notched the end of their ear, so I know they've been wormed. Because if they've been wormed, we do not keep them. But I would like animal to sell. So I ear notched them on the end. I also went through the ewes pretty rough. Anything that had a bag I didn't like or didn't shed as good as I wanted or whatever other thing it may be. And I've got a load of ewes that I'm going to take to the sale barn. Our flock has a good number. We don't really want to increase it. So we thought about selling a few ewe lambs, and we may still do it depending on our numbers. But one thing, I do not want anything that's got any kind of problem. It's basically one strike and you're out. If I worm you, you go to sell barn. If you don't shed, you go to sell barn. Bad bag, you're going to sell barn. Just takes one thing and you're out because I want a low maintenance, quality sheep flock. So that's been happening on the farm. 10 seconds about the podcast. Really don't have much to share today. We are working on some new merch. Be dropping soon. And that's basically it. Let's cut through the chase and go talk to Jessica. Jessica, we want to welcome you to the Grazing Grass Podcast. We're excited you're here today.
Thanks so much, Cal. It is a pleasure to be here. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Wonderful. Let's get started by talking a little bit about yourself and your operation.
Absolutely. So my name is Jessica Newman. I am a first-generation farmer located in northeast Pennsylvania. So we always joke that we could fit and hit New York. So we're 5 miles from the border. And so very close. We typically go grocery shopping in New York, right? You just everything close there. So we are in what's called the Endless Mountains of Pennsylvania. We're only about 3 hours west of New York City and about an hour south of Ithaca, New York. So again,
Oh,
just
okay.
really in that far northeast corner of Pennsylvania. So the farm's actually, it's funny, we live in this valley where the Chemung and Shishikwan rivers come together and they form and really flow out through the Chesapeake Bay. So I currently live in town and it's on a peninsula sort of that comes down as the two rivers meet and then flows south. But the farm is on some of the mountains that create the valley. And so in town, I think it's 800 feet above sea level. And at the farm, we're like 1,400. So you
Oh,
go
yes.
up. So we definitely have a little bit of a climate change from town to where the farm is. So I don't live on the farm. I bought the farm now in 2014, and it was just some grass. A local guy was selling it. It didn't grow up here. My folks had moved here for my dad's job, and my mom had some health concerns, and so I moved up. I was working in Tennessee at the time, and I moved up here and really had been getting more interested. I've always had a little love and interest in agriculture, but I'm a nurse by trade and still work as a nurse full time. So it's been fun to tackle the farming side of things and lots to learn, but growing the farm from scratch and nothing has its own unique challenges.
Oh, I'm sure. So
So
when you bought that land, I think you said 2014. Was
yeah,
that the reason you bought the land? You thought, I'm going to get some sheep or something and do a farm?
yes. So and actually we ended up calling it Southview Station because I was like, we're gonna have sheep here. And in Australia, they call their like big properties, we don't have that big, but they call them stations instead of
Yes.
ranches or farms. And there's so many places around here that are called farms, like everything's a farm. And so it
Uh-huh.
just felt like, I don't know, boring.
Yeah.
So
Something a
we
little
went,
more unique.
right. And sheep centric. We do have cows,
Yes.
but yeah, primarily sheep. And so hence the name.
So were sheep always something you thought, you mentioned you had this drawn to the farm. Was sheep always the animal that really drew you in?
So funny enough, when I was younger and had a little bit of experience, I thought I might go and be a vet. My
Oh, yeah.
parents let us do a 4-H cow when I was like 8, right? And the local dairy down the road let me borrow this atrocious calf who was horrible. She was horrible. She drugged me down one side and back the other. I still liked it. So I guess it
Oh, you
didn't
go.
turn me off. And yeah, so my experience was with a couple ponies and some cows. I volunteered at my local vet clinic and got a little bit of taste of some domestic animals, but not really farm
Oh,
livestock.
yeah.
But as I got older, I just thought about things like sheep. I'd never met, in all honesty and transparency, I'd literally never met a sheep.
Yes.
I did not know that I would really like a sheep. I just had this inkling, sneaking suspicion, and I guess I know myself well enough it's true.
Oh, well, very good. I knew when I was in high school in FFA, I showed dairy cattle. I would see the people showing sheep and how much work they put into their sheep.
Mhm.
And pig people put in a lot of work too, but the sheep really did because they build them a round pen and do so many jumps to build muscle. And then the amount of shearing they did for their sheep,
Oh
they
yeah,
were always shearing and shaping their sheep.
tremendous.
I was so glad to have dairy cattle because I was like, well, I washed them and now I trimmed the top line, maybe a little bit on their legs so they look thinner.
Yeah. Like
Oh,
we're good to go.
yeah. I was always amazed at the amount of work they would put into sheep, which,
Yeah.
interesting enough, now I've got lots of sheep, but I don't have to shear them.
Yep. Yep.
But you didn't go that way with your sheep. So you get your
No.
land. Yeah, that's just a teaser for just a little bit. You got your land. Were you ready to put animals on it?
No. So the very first, and actually, I still to this day chuckle that bless his heart. Like the gentleman who I bought my first set of 7 sheep and 1 ram because that's all I could afford. He is amazing to this day, has been an amazing mentor,
Oh,
and
yes. Very.
which I know you don't always find. And I feel super blessed to have had that, but I swear he thought when he dropped his sheep off that day into electric netting and there was nothing basically else on the property, that he was probably committing them to certain doom. But he's been pleasantly surprised, as he's told me more than once, that I didn't kill off all the sheep.
Oh, that's great.
So, yeah, no, we put in some perimeter fence on the main farm property. So I have basically 30 acres of grass and 10 of woods that I own. And we put some perimeter fence around the grass of that and have added like a smallish barn with kind of some dedicated sacrifice areas for like winter, which we can talk a little bit more on. We've got about a 40-degree grade on our land. So it just slopes down like a giant rectangle from top to bottom. So we probably graze around 26 acres on that, what I'll call home property. And then actually my neighbors saw what we were doing, and they have about another 40 acres of grass that I graze. And then even the neighbor at the bottom of the hill, I graze about 3.5 acres for him that's connected to all of the properties. So that's worked out nicely. Hopefully something long-term is, what I'm praying for that one. But we're rehabbing those pastures back from being once a year mulch hayed, which really meant that it was just goldenrod and pigweed or hogweed, if you've heard of that, and just milkweed. So much so that there was actually looked like reeds had been laid out on the ground because of the goldenrod that just fell every year in the snow and just built up like layers of goldenrod stalk. So we're really the last 3, we've been grazing there 3 years, and we've been working on that. But yeah, so really we had to put in a well, electric pole, the fence, the barn area, and so a little bit of everything. But I got the sheep before we had pretty much any of that.
Oh, yes. So
may or may not have been the smartest thing I did.
We won't ask my wife to come on and tell you how smart I was with different things. When you got your sheep, you got your, with your electric netting, you got your sheep and you had electric netting there. Did you go into it thinking we're going to rotate these daily?
Yeah, so I had like probably 95%, I feel, of the grazers anymore will say like they heard about Joel Saladin. They really, were introduced to agriculture maybe that way, or to rotations that way. So I was a little bit, I understood some, hey, we should move these creatures around, right? It's good. Even on the 26 acres at that time, basically 8 sheep did not do a lot for me.
Right, yeah.
It just, you weren't able to really even move them around fast enough to probably make a dent in the pasture. But so there was a lot of higher grasses throughout the year. I worked a lot in pulling milkweed because initially I just thought the sheep shouldn't eat it. And so we just by hand, trying to get it out of there, which is effective, menial, but effective. And remove the milkweed. But I really learned that for the most part, the sheep handle it just fine. But don't do that in the new pastures I graze. But yeah, so really started to move them around, just using what we could as we could. And then they'll come back in the winter months to the sacrifice areas. We get really wet. We have very heavy clay soil, and it's been a challenge. And actually, with the steepness of our grade, I'm hoping over time here to add in a little better water infrastructure. I've got some frost-free hydrants, and then I've got 2 waterers that are underground, like Ritchie waterers that are in the barnyard for the winter, so they don't freeze, and those work nicely. But the challenge is really extending the grazing season for me. You basically, in the spring up until a certain point, and then in the fall, you aren't driving anything out on that. No tractor, no truck. You ain't getting up that slope. You get out there. We've stuck cars out there. We've got the tractor stuck out there. Because once you slide, the slick soil, you'll just spin. I mean, with chains, it doesn't matter. So that's interesting. If I'm going to do hay out on the pasture, it has to be out there by September. If it's not, you ain't getting it out there because it will rain and start to get muddy and forget it. So there's a lot of that pre-planning that's just over time I've had to figure out, okay, what's going to work? Or if the year is just not a good year and something breaks down, I'm like, we're hosed.
Oh,
We're not going to be grazing out like I thought we were going to, because it's just right now that part is not really feasible. So I'd eventually like to run some water lines to make the latter grazing, because that's the limiting factor right now for the later season grazing, because I can get the bales out usually pretty consistently, but trying to get water once it starts to freeze up here by November, it gets cold enough. It's hard right now. I jokingly say that I farm with a little garden tractor, really. So I have a small John Deere, like 400. It just has a little 52-inch mower deck, and it's just a glorified bigger lawnmower. And so I haul actually like a little water trailer that I put a few 55-gallon drums on. And so we haul that for all of our water. And like I put like trash cans in the back that have like mineral on there. And it just comes the general trailer to haul everything around. And that's how we get water to everybody as we're going to the places, and we're still up their water tubs out there.
Oh, yes.
So right now I have total 10 adult cows and then some youngins, and then I have about 100 sheep now. So that's like size wise where we're at. So maybe give people a sense of like
7
progression.
expanded really well.
Yeah.
Actually, just going back to that 7, it's like chicken math. You've always heard of chicken math.
Yes,
you get 2
it really
chickens,
is.
add 2 more, and pretty soon you've got a dozen. Then it just goes crazy.
It does.
With the sheep, one thing I know you mentioned, when we're getting started, it's often a shoestring budget. It's something we're trying to do. But the problem I see so many people do, they bring in too many animals. And then they don't get to know their land, and they're overgrazing from the get-go. And in fact, there's a new gentleman that owns land next to me. And I talked to him the other day, and he had 3 cows, and he'd bought like a dozen more. And he's like, I got lots of grass. I said, he says, how many cows should I get? And I said, I wouldn't buy any more.
No more.
I said, yeah, this is the best time of the year. This is a couple months ago in May. I said, you will not have more grass than you have right now. So you need to not stock for May. You need to stock for August or the winter.
Right.
And he's, okay, I won't buy any more then. I'm like, let's
good call.
Stand pat and see what we've got there. So just getting started with 7 gives you that opportunity to see how your land does and not overgraze. But it's really tough because I know for me, my wife says it all the time, I jump in the deep end. So I don't want to buy 2, I want to buy 30.
Right,
so I get that.
And I think it's pros and cons, right? So I slowly funded like my growth just with working off farm, and then slowly just like being able to add things as we could. And there's really, like you said, the pros and cons, right? It's beneficial to not sometimes dive in so full that you end up kind of making a fatal error in a sense that then you're really struggling. What do I do? But from a business perspective, it's really challenging to start slow. You show year after year of loss for the most part. I mean, unless you are in a really great market, like you have an excellent business plan where you may be able to still show some kind of profit. I always tell people, like, we've been to ranching for profit and have done some business work, but it's really challenging. And I know they always say, well, you have to calculate your opportunity cost for those people that have family property, especially. And don't just take it. But I think there's something to be said that it's really hard to make anything to have to build everything, right? Like, how long are you going to space out that building without showing a negative, right? Because you basically would have to slowly, incrementally put your infrastructure together to not show a loss, for the multiple front years when you are just trajectory vertical on a business like that in a farm where you're going from zero, that I think that's really challenging and something that's not always thought about maybe from people thinking about like that business plan. I mean, it is one thing to say, hey, I'm sitting on a nest egg that's making money. And yes, every year I should set aside money for if I had to purchase more, if I had to pay rent or like all those things. Like it's one thing to say that, but it is something totally different to like really be scraping that together. So I think from a business perspective, it is challenging to start small and then just let the flock grow or let the herd expand and, be like, when are we getting beef? 7 years from now? 6 years from like, when is that going to really happen?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
How many are you going to keep back for breeding stock? That means you still don't have anything to sell so that you can expand your herd more so that you have more to sell in 5 years, right? Those are like all of those questions have to be answered and thought about.
Yeah.
Sometimes going hog wild solves you from.
Well, yeah, because you get the benefit of numbers. You bring in, you're making a little bit of money each animal. So if you have higher numbers of animals, that total gross is much better. But yeah, there's pros and cons to both ways. I'm a big fan of Mike Machilwitz, that I'm sure I said that wrong, who wrote the book Profit First, as well as almost 100 other books, it seems. Maybe it's only 10. But he is very adamant in there that your business has got to make profit day one. And I have a little side business in addition to the farm, and that thing still needs to make profit. And it's tough to do that initially with the initial cost of farming if you want to own animals. Now, one way you follow Greg Judy's model where you lease the land and you do custom grazing. That model makes it a little bit easier to get in and make some money immediately. But if you're trying to own some livestock and you don't want to go that route, you've got to shove some money in there before, and it's going to be a little while before you make it.
And even then, I understand, and I do think it is a great model to do that, like lease land and do custom grazing. I think that's an amazing opportunity. I think there's a couple of things like, you got to know people like in the area. Like you got to be an established person in town, right? Nobody's gonna be like, a stranger that showed up down the street wants to take your cows. Like nobody, right? And then I think you really have to be able to, you have to know how to graze and how to manage those animals, which again, are you going to learn all of that on somebody else's animals and convince somebody that they should take that risk on you if you don't know? So it's a little kind of, do you do some on your own? Do you just purchase some stockers in and like monkey around the first couple years and get established? Again, I think even that takes a little bit of you got to have some run ramp, right? Because it's easy to say if a dad or cousin or guy down the road that's seen you for all your life was willing to give you a try on 20 dairy heifers. But I think it can be really challenging to, and I think you also have to be, and not everyone is. For some people, I think it's fine and it doesn't make a difference. But for some people, I do think there's a methodology of stockers feed into agricultural kind of niche that not everyone wants to support. Like at the end of the day, what are your support through stockers? You're supporting feedlots, then supporting like just mass produced beef, which again, I'm not saying is hands down should never be done. But I also think you have to know that and that has to be within your sphere of, yep, I'm good with that. And again, it won't be for everybody.
And you point out a couple of things. You got to have some knowledge there, some relationships, network. And then how does that align with your beliefs? Yeah. I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before. My dad put in broiler houses and we raised chickens for a little while.
Yeah.
Which is very anti what my beliefs are. But at the time it made money and that's what we needed.
Right,
so
exactly.
It's a tough call
it
there.
It puts food on the table.
Yeah. So sometimes, in fact, the episode coming out, well, when this episode comes out, the episode will have been out like 4 weeks, but This coming week, we have a gentleman on, and he suffered the same thing because he did some broilers, houses, and he's trying to do it more regenerative now. There's that conflict in there. So it's an interesting discussion.
I think we just all have to work through that.
Yeah, I think so. And at the end of the day, we don't want to be money driven, but at the same time, we've got to be able to make profit. And if you have the off the farm job, it really assists you in building that infrastructure and getting going better. But it's a tough call, and each person has to make their own call at that time.
Yeah. It's really true. It's really true. And try not to let that off farm cripple the business, help it limp along.
Right. Because at a certain point, you need the farm to stand on its own legs, even with the off the farm job. But yeah, it's something to work through. Lots of steps in there. Now, when you decided to get sheep, did you know, you'd already said you were drawn to sheep. Did you already know what breed you wanted to get or what type you wanted to get? Or how did you figure that?
That's funny. I wouldn't have said very initially I knew I wanted a wool breed, actually, which is funny, but I don't knit. I don't do any fiber arts. That's not for me. But I really like that. I like some aspects of wool breeds. I do what they bring to the table. I can go into that a little bit more, but I knew I did want a sheep that was a wool producing breed. And so actually my parents had done, because I was still in Tennessee at the time, we were looking through different sheep breeds. What might we want to? And they actually went to a local state fair and they were like, hey, what about this Texel breed? We like the look of them. And I looked them up, looked about them, and I was like, yeah, I really like this breed, which I know they're not for everybody. A lot of people say they're so ugly, they're cute. I don't think they're ugly. I think some of the gene pool tends to be on the ugly side, but I think there's a lot of that breed that's not. So they're a primary terminal sire meat producing breed. They're very common in the UK, one of their top terminal sires in the UK. And so, that made our decision there. We knew we wanted a meat producing animal. We weren't going to be doing dairy primarily, or fiber primarily. And so I really loved their docility. Like, they're a very calm, kind of personable sheep. They're very much, they'll come over for not all of them. Like, some of them are a little more reserved, but they'll come over for a head scratch or a butt scratch. And they're just, they tend to be a very kind of friendly sheep, which is nice. I don't do animals that leap over fences to get away from me. If you do that, you're gone. We have had a few of those. I don't want to die trying to take care of you. So that's what took us on the Texel road. I have a little bit of a hodgepodge. I have a couple cross sheep that we really just do for our meat animal. I mean, we have Texels that will not be breeding stock that also, become meat as well. And I've actually last year I added some Romanoff ewes. So they're actually one of the composite animals within the composite for the Easy Care sheep that are supposed to be very maternal, great producing ewes, because I'd like to have a nice variety within my flock of really commercially producing animals that are producing a little bit of a higher litter size. It's great to have a purebred terminal sire that really you can have that consistency of genetics and be working towards the genetic side of things, which I think is really fun. But you also, again, from the business perspective, looking at how do you increase turnover and what are you going for when it comes to marketable animals. And so we're going to be playing with kind of adding the Texel of that terminal sire onto the Romanoff cross and starting there and see how we go.
With your Texels, what kind of lambing percent do you get out of those, since it's a terminal sire breed as a makeup?
Yeah, so I've actually been really playing with that to see what is the possibility. So I would say I've typically seen, a low, like maybe 125. Which I would be really happy with if everybody just had twins. Like, I don't need everybody to be having quintuplets.
Right. Yeah.
Not only for the sake of numbers and lambing, but especially with Texels, like you'll get massive lamb, especially those singles, because mom can just feed
Yeah.
you. I mean, in utero. And so lambing tends to be
Right.
more difficult when you're talking singles in the purebred world versus being twins. So I've been trying to play with, is it really my management of them, right? Is it a flushing or a kind of a nutrition standpoint? Is it when we're breeding? So we lamb late. I've been playing with that as well. This year is the latest I've ever gone, but we lambed out starting the end of May, like the 15th, I think was our first lamb
Oh,
of
yes.
May. And so we're breeding starting Christmas through into the new year. And so is it really the timing of breeding that's causing maybe the ewes were dropping a lot more eggs earlier in the fall, and then they
Oh,
slow
yeah.
down towards the end of the breeding season. So does that contribute? So I have been playing with that a little bit and trying to better understand the contributing factors for our lambing percentage to see if that can't be something that, at least on the purebred side, that we can really improve. I think
Oh, yeah.
it behooves us in multiple ways to grow that and to increase that.
Now, with your Texel, you're lambing into May.
Mhm.
You're weaning at, I'm going to say 3 months.
Yep.
And then at what age are you? Let's see. Maybe I need a word that I was thinking about slaughter as the end point, but a lot of your animals are going to breeding stock.
Mhm.
So you're using your crossbred lambs more for lamb processing and to sell meat.
Yeah. So I continue to grow my business model, right? And again, sorry, sometimes I feel like it sounds wishy-washy, but I've really tried a lot of different ways. So yes, we are weaning off between 8 and 12 weeks. I'm
Oh,
going to
okay.
play with that a little. I was listening to there's an Irish podcast, sheep podcast I listened to, and they were really talking about there's not actually a lot of good clinical research and evidence out there that shows that weaning later is actually beneficial. Instead, the lambs are really competing with the ewes for grass. And really,
Oh.
for us, at the driest time to wean is a hard time to wean and expect gain. So the Texels lamb, while they're nursing, they're gaining. You hope it's around 0.8 pounds a day. So anywhere between half a pound and a pound of gain a day is very reasonable. But when you take that kind of gain and then you throw it onto some like late August grasses, it tends to face plant. And so again, working on what that could really, how I can benefit the operation by maybe making some adjustments. So when we wean, then the animals are going into their own pool, the lamb pool. I don't castrate the ram. Everybody goes in together. Lambs and rams, I'll pull off, and then we'll start to graze them separately. I've done 100% grass fed. We've had, again, based on the type of grass, because I really think you'd be wildly more successful doing like a annual like cover crop or some kind of planted grass, taking those lambs straight onto that as far as like really productive grass-fed, grass-finished gains. I think that's really the best way to go. I don't think, we always talk about that. I think we feel like we just make it sound like they just, get to their fat and happy giant selves just without any assistance. And I found that, again, something maybe genetically we can continue to refine and grow and continue to build for that animal body type that does still thrive in that. But for me, we've bounced around. Okay, do we provide, say, some soy hull as a non-grain-based supplement? Do we just do some corn? What financially makes sense? What's best for the animal? What makes sense for when you're still out on grass and moving around? I don't know about you, but like hauling a lot of various things out to the pasture and trying to do other supplementation, it gets old fast. But so that's still in refinement, I would say. I continue to change that and grow that every year is what makes sense. But yeah, so then once really we're to the fall, some lambs will go then for butcher. Sometimes actually any older animals that I found that are not going to stay part of the flock, whether we did sell them as breeding stock for a variety of reasons. And maybe I'm like, you know what? You're not quite living up to what I thought you were going to. Sometimes they'll actually go first for butcher because they're bigger, they're older. We still have a pretty good, reasonable local market that we do sell to, not as like farmers market. I do not do farmers markets. I do not. We could talk about that more later, but I don't have neither the time nor bandwidth to do so. But we do have the ability to market a lot of our lambs relatively locally. And so this year, with the biggest lamb crop I've had, I'm going to actually do some lambs to the market, like take them to the auction. And so we'll keep the cream of the crop on top and then feed. And actually, I've been working out, trying to figure when's the best time to send them. I had the little coach or mentor one time, and I was like, well, I think I need to get them to, I can't remember what I told him at the time. I was like, I think they need to be to 80 pounds. And then that's like the best because the price per pound is, I don't know, $2.50 or something at that weight. And he was like, but is that actually like the best? Does that give you the most profit? And I was like, well, I don't know, I guess, right? Like it's $2.50 a pound. Right. Seems better than like $1.50 a pound. Yeah. I was like, yeah, but what's going in to get to that $2.50, right? Which is a totally legitimate question and changed my mindset. So really just trying to price out, okay, so if we wean them let's just say we wean them at 50 pounds, right? Just for an even number, and like what's the price per pound at that point? And then I have nothing else into them if they just go. What do I get back? Okay, what if I feed them according to XYZ and we get them up to 80 pounds? And then what's the price and what I have in them and what's the ultimate profit? To actually determine like when should we send the lamb. And so I've kind of been playing with that. I'm hoping to get them a little closer to 100 actually for us.
Oh yeah.
And then send them. I think it's actually going to be the best profit margin for us for the lamb. And that actually will buy us a little more time for me to see how everyone's filling out and looking. So some will go for breeding stock. Those customers, because we lamb really late, a lot of the breeding stock I actually sell their second year. Well, they'll just have turned one into that first summer. Because a lot of guys, like if they want a lamb, like start breeding in August, like my ram lambs are not, unless you have a very small flock and your sheep are pretty small in stature, they're not going to be ready for you. And so I'll sell yearlings for that. You have to take into the cost like of getting them through their first winter, which is not super terrible. You do have to just, with cows, I feel like I raise calves later, like calving later makes sense. And then the cows like nurse for 6 months, or even if you do a little bit less, and then you can wean them. And the timing in the year feels really comfortable to me, right? Like it feels very like natural. With lambs, I find it's a little more challenging. Are you going to lamb earlier? It's like frigid and horrible. We don't live at the farm, so I usually tent it during the night because I like to be I like to still do checks. I'm not a hands-off. And so I usually will tent during camping, and I don't like to tent in March and February up here. Like it's not, I'm just telling you right now, no. So even April is very unpredictable for us. You have put a snow. So but then if you lamb earlier like that, then the ewes have like lower nutrition. You're going to feed the mom, but the lambs will be ready to hit the spring flush that boosts their gain. If you lamb later, like this year was great as far as getting the ewes basically on grass in like early to mid-April. Let them have a month of great green grazing prior to lambing to boost their nutrition plane. And then we actually lambed on pasture and then just kept on going, which has been great for the ewes and the grazing. But then again, you're going to take them off midsummer. And then that window, it just always seems somehow that the cows do have a little bit more of an easy, natural rhythm that sheep still feel like if it's good for one like either ewe or lamb, it's not as good for the other, whether it's the market or the animal's nutrition, if that makes sense.
Makes sense to me. And then you get into beyond what you're grazing out in the pasture or the stage, the nutritional requirements of that ewe or lamb, then you got the market on the other side that's not nearly as flat as the cattle market. Granted, cattle people's out there yelling at me right now that it's not flat.
That it's not
I get
flat.
that. But it is flatter than the sheep market because it's really cyclical. And those price drops, I had an accidental lambing crop this year, and I weaned those lambs and took them straight to the auction, which is not something we do. And actually, when I figured numbers, we came out really good on that.
Yeah.
But like you said, they were lambing in February when I normally don't want to lamb. And some years we have really good weather. Some years we don't. That worked out really nice. I was impressed with that. I wasn't sad about that accidental lambing this year.
Right. It really can be. And I think it does so depend on where you are and what market you're going to too, because it's funny. We're close to New York City, but it was interesting. I was talking to an Amish guy who bought some rams off of me, and they're not always, in my experience, the chattiest of my customers, right? Especially to me. But this guy's great. He's fantastic. And we had a really nice conversation. And he was saying they just recently had moved from the Midwest, was where they were living before. And he was like, we used to send our lambs all the time and we would get like $3 a pound and we had good market then. And here he was like, I can't believe like how not great your markets are.
Oh.
Which is partly, I think, maybe at times like a sign of the inconsistent, and you have a lot more like small farms producing a little bit more of an inconsistent product that then your buyers are buying and then trying to put together like loads or lots, right? I think that maybe could play a part into some of that lower price, but it was interesting in talking to him about, are there ways or things we can do to improve and change the market locally up here?
Yeah. Very interesting. Jessica, it's almost time we transition to the overgrazing. But I do have a question before we get there. I want to talk a little bit more about your breeding stock. You sell those Texel rams out. What kind of flocks are they going to? Are they going to other or flocks that are predominantly wool? Are some people buying them to use them on hair sheep? Or are they going more into purebred programs?
Really funny enough, a variety. So I get a fair number that are looking for, they have a purebred program of some kind, or at least another wool sheep that may be a crop that they're still producing market lambs, but it might be another wool sheep. So they're going that direction. But then we also do have customers who say they have cotton ewes. They just, at least if they buy a ram that's wool, it's not as much deal to shear one ram, and the lambs are going to leave before it matters whether they're going to be fleeced or not deal.
Right.
So I definitely see a variety there of customers. Both for ewes, it's mostly for purebred, but for the ram, it's a blend.
Yeah. Well, I think I've talked about this on the podcast before. Sometimes I think about getting more of a terminal cross on my ewes, on my hair ewes, whether that's Dorper or going with a wool breed, so I have bigger lambs. It's crossed my mind. I've not done it, but I've talked about it a lot.
I think as long as you are happy with and you're getting the prices that you're looking for and your buyer has either a consistent product that they're getting that they are happy with, the meatiness of it, or else it's to an extent where maybe it doesn't really matter so much. I think you have to go one way or the other, which everybody has their own philosophy.
Right, yeah. Whatever works into your program, your context,
Yep.
Well, Jessica, it is time for us to transition to the overgrazing section, where we take a little bit deeper dive into something you're doing on your farm. And one thing we had talked just briefly before, you have an off-the-farm job and the farm. So let's talk just a little bit about your time management and how you do that, because that can be pretty difficult. And I know you're a nurse. So are you working a regular 40-hour week, like 5 days of 8-hour shifts, or do you have a different schedule?
Yeah, so great question. Sometimes I don't do it well, cows. Ultimate answer. Let's just all be honest right up front. But yeah, so right now I do. It's funny. I work as a nurse in supply chain, which has been a really interesting role. I haven't always. I've worked multiple different jobs at the bedside, working traditional 12-hour shifts to other roles. But so right now I do work Monday through Friday. The schedule varies a little bit, but 8-hour days basically.
That's nice.
Yeah, it has its pros and cons. When you're like,
Yes.
hey, look, it's going to be thunderstorming every afternoon this week, right when I want to do chores. And you're like dodging lightning bolts, like trying to get chores done. That's when you're like, curses, I wish I could have done chores at 9 a.m.
Oh, yes.
when the
Right,
weather
yeah.
was cooperating. So yes, I do work that Monday through Friday. So that leaves me the weekend and then after hours. So most nights I get to the farm, depends, but around 5 o'clock, I would say. And so I'll typically do around 3 hours worth of chores, have fence moving and whatever else needs to be done on farm or the day to day. And it is challenging. I think one thing I've had to learn over the time is sometimes you're not going to get everything done exactly like you wanted. You're not going to, it's not going to be perfect or be exactly what you wanted, but you also have to live life on top too, right? Like some days
Yes,
I
you
don't feel
do.
good.
Yes.
Some days it's someone's birthday party. Some days there's other things in life that are important that matter, whether that's, again, taking vacation or family holidays or events. There's things. And sometimes the farm will encroach in a way that it really has to be dealt with as a life or death. But even then, sometimes, okay, what has to be dealt with right now, what stuff's just going to have to wait, whether I like it or not. And that does happen. Like sometimes, I wish like I could always do twice a day checks on everybody right now, but the farm's a good 15 minutes away from my house. And so that's 30 minutes round trip. And so there's some days when that doesn't work. Like I've got
Oh,
a
yeah.
7 a.m. meeting I've got to be ready for. I didn't get everything done for it in time. That means I need to start working out by 6. Like I'm probably not getting a morning check on that day. Like it's not going to happen. So some of those things, like just balancing that internally, I think sometimes I still have not anxiety, but like I'll still have that pull, that fight in myself. Like, oh my gosh, did I do enough? Did I, crap?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
if only I'd have been able to do X, Y, Z. But then other stuff, I feel like I've really settled into the routine. Like I don't feel bad like taking a vacation. Like I don't feel bad, getting off farm or something's not good. Hey, we stayed here 2 days and yeah, it would have been nice if we could have done daily moves this week, but that just didn't happen. And it's gonna be okay.
It is. In ways, I'm a perfectionist, and in other
Yeah.
ways, you would look at things and you say, there's no way he even cares about that. So, it's a struggle to get it all done and get in there. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the authors, is it Tim Ferriss, that says you should be able to take a 4-week vacation?
I think it
Um,
is.
be-
Yeah.
because you should have your business built that it
Yep.
doesn't need you there all the time. That's a pipe dream right here.
Right.
We're
Right.
not anywhere near that, but we can take vacations, and
Mhm.
it's really good to get off the farm.
And it's
And
funny.
some are good about that, and some people
Yes.
aren't.
And sometimes it still happens. I'll tell you, Cal, it was funny. I was telling you when we were chatting right before we started talking how we'd taken a road trip last year out to see
Oh,
my
yes.
grandmother in New Mexico. And so we're like driving out west, basically. And I think we're in Illinois. We're like 8-10 hours into the first day of driving, right? When the kid who watches a farm for me, which I try and set everything up, like they're grazing bales, right? Like I'd rather pay the cost to pay than have to spend extra time trying to, teach the kid that I have to do it. So like we'll do bale grazing and whatever. And so the Rams got in with all the ewes. And I was like,
Oh, no.
Oh. So at that moment, I was like, Jessica, you can freak out in the car and lose your ever-loving mind. And what is that going to do you? Nothing. It's going to do you no good. I'm like, if we have lambs, like if he doesn't get any of them out, if they all stayed in there, okay, well, then we're going to it's going to be a wild and woolly lambing season, not when I wanted. And all those lambs will just go to market because we won't know who the dad is. And it's just going to be fine.
Right.
Like, whatever, right? Like, no one died.
Right.
It's going to be okay.
Yes.
And he was great. Like, he got them separated, bless him. And we only actually ended up with 2 lambs that popped out a month early.
That's pretty good.
Right. All in all, it was fine. It was those moments when you're like, does this mean I shouldn't take a trip? No. Stuff's sometimes just going to happen.
Yeah. Now, I got a question for you. You get off work, do you go home and then go out to the farm? Or do you go straight to the farm, then home?
Depends. I have...
And the reason I asked you, when I had the off-the-farm job, I'll have the off-the-farm, I say the in front of everything. When I had a off-the-farm job, we would get home and I'd come in the house to change. And I had to be careful because if I sat down or stayed in one place too long, I'm like, oh man,
I don't want to go.
That's always tough. Yeah. And it's really tough to get out now. If I would come home and I would just change and head out the door, I don't know, that tiredness didn't hit me at that time. So it was easier for me.
Yes. I do try to just make it like, come home, get the dogs in the car, get a change of clothes and go, because I agree with you. If I let myself settle, I do not want to do it. But it would not be the first. There has been more than one occasion when I've either gone to the farm in work clothes with like my pants shoved in like muck boot and been like, don't get too dirty, because I had to go straight to work after. I'd be like, do I have lamb wool like on me? Like bottle feeding babies, getting that done before the work day, or vice versa. Like sometimes it's like, man, this needs to get done. So I'm literally standing in the parking lot at work, like taking off like clothes, like putting on the work clothes. So it does happen.
I can remember this was like in 01, 02. I just started teaching and I was teaching 4K. So 4-year-olds.
Oh yeah.
So one day I'm setting on the rug, and we have them set on the rug at that age, and we're setting crisscross there. That was the age that I could set on the floor without much problem. And I start smelling manure. I'm like, I stepped in some manure when I ran out to do chores real quick before I went to work and didn't get them cleaned off my boots very good.
Yep.
Like, it happened.
It really does. It does. People that don't realize the struggle's real. Or my mom's picked me up from work, again, bless her, and she's like, a lamb, somebody's having trouble in the pasture, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take a break right now and bring my boots in the car with you, and we're gonna like race to the farm. I'm gonna pull a lamb, everybody's alive. Okay, take me back home, take me back to work. And you're like at work, like scrubbing placenta off. It's like,
right, yes.
Don't mind me.
The good part is that scrubs off easier than pig or chicken. Those smells really attach to you.
Oh, they stay.
Well, Jessica, it's been a great conversation, but it's time that we transition to the famous 4 questions sponsored by Ken Cove Farm Fence. Ken Cove Farm Fence is a proud supporter of the Grazing Grass podcasts and grazers everywhere. At Ken Cove Farm Fence, they believe there's true value within the community of grazers and land stewards. The results that follow proper management and monitoring can change the very world around us. That's why Ken Cove is dedicated to providing an ever-expanding line of grazing products to make your chores easier and your land more abundant. Whether you're growing your own food on the homestead or grazing on thousands of acres, Ken Cove has everything you need to do it well. From reels to tumblewheels, polytwine to electric nets, water valves to water troughs, you'll find what you're looking for at Ken Cove. They carry brands like Speedrite, O'Brien's, Kiwi Tech, Strainrite, Job, and more. Ken Cove is proud to be part of your regenerative journey. Call them today or visit kencove.com, and be sure to follow them on social media and subscribe to the Ken Cove YouTube channel at Ken Cove Farm Fence for helpful how-to videos and new product releases. They're the same 4 questions we ask of all of our guests. And our first question today is, what is your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
Yeah, so I would say, obviously, in all honesty, Cal, I love the Grazing Grass podcast. I am a
Well,
huge
thank you.
You're welcome. I'm a huge podcast listener. It's great for when I'm out doing chores. It feels like I'm still turning through, being able to get other information. So there's also a really great, I know it's grass related, but just in general, like farm business and profitability. But The Profitable Farmer is probably one of my favorite podcasts as well. It really just has some outstanding business principles that's absolutely farm focused. And it's out of Australia. It's really
Okay.
similar, a lot of same principles as ranching for profit, but I find just the approach is a little different than ranching for profit, which for some people might be beneficial. Or I think sometimes when you
Oh,
hear
yeah.
something coming from a new direction, it's just different. And then I actually really OVI CAST, and that is a
Oh,
sheep podcast out of Ireland. You have to catch their accents, but they actually do have some really great. They were talking even just this week about weaning onto pasture and how
oh,
they
yeah.
recommend that is done. So just another good resource that might be a little different to some of the listeners. So
Oh, very good. Those excellent resources mentioned. I say that I'm not familiar with either of them, so I will have to give both of them a listen. So thank you for that.
of course.
Our second question, what is your favorite tool for the farm?
Cal, I knew this question was coming, and I've been like thinking long and hard about it because I'm like, I don't want to give some stupid answer. But in all honesty, one of my favorite tools on the farm is my phone. And I know that
Mhm.
probably does sound stupid, but it literally everything from listening to podcasts while I'm working to I keep my notes, like running notes that I start every
Oh,
year
yeah.
at breeding season. So like marking who looks good, who looks bad, who do I definitely want to cull, to looking up like a dose of medication. I use that thing for farming, and I have even stuff like there is a Merlin app. It's called Merlin, and it's a bird app. I don't know if you've ever
Oh,
used
yeah.
it. I love it. You can record birds in your pasture, and it'll tell you these are the birds you're hearing. And you can even listen to all the extra sounds. And so we recorded like, here's all the birds that are on the farm and what seasons do they get here, which I
Oh,
know is
yes.
probably nerdy and stupid, but I still really, I think there's still things you have to like have the joy in the work, and not everything has to be painful and miserable. And if I like to listen to my bird app when I'm at the farm so that I can be like, oh my gosh, look, this is the first time I saw like a wood thrush, then I'm
Oh,
gonna do
yeah.
it, pal.
Well, actually, on that, I came across this app just the other day. I didn't download it yet because I was looking for something to keep track of all the different species I see on my land.
Yes.
Plant species, birds, mammals. I'd love to do insects,
Cool.
but I
Yeah.
was looking for an app that would let me keep track of that so I know what all's out there. I hadn't found one that I really does what I want. I use PlantNet a lot
Yeah.
for
Me too.
IDing plants, but I've got a spreadsheet I've started trying to keep track of
Nothing's
stuff.
nerdier than a
But just
spreadsheet, Cal.
I love spreadsheets. I love spreadsheets. But sometimes spreadsheets are difficult on the phone. So
Right. True.
that's where I was like, I gotta find something. But you
Yeah.
mentioned this app, and then you mentioned PlantNet that you use. What other apps do you like?
Those ones are, in all honesty, probably the biggest ones. Aside from, I use my notes, I use my podcast, I use my PlantNet, I use Merlin, and so those are probably my biggest
Oh,
ones.
yeah.
I wish I could say I used like a ton of other ones, and then I love just being able to take pictures and have stuff documented. Here's what the grass looked like when we
Oh,
grazed it, or
yeah.
before we grazed it, or after we grazed it. So again, I know it's probably lame, but my phone. Maybe secondarily followed up by either my like winter zoot suit or like my headlamp.
Oh, there you
None
go.
of those
Yes.
seemed as fun.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The phone, I would be lost without it. In
Yeah.
fact, I hate to admit this, but I've got an Apple Watch. and
Mhm.
I couldn't find my earbuds I like. I've got some JBL earbuds I really love, and I don't know. I checked my desk. I checked my
Like missing.
chest where I put everything on top. I checked the shelf in the bathroom where I sometimes empty out my pocket. I carry those earbuds everywhere, and I couldn't find them, so I had to get my AirPods, which I don't like because they don't stay in my ear good. But then I get over there and I put them in today, and usually I just use one, but I was brush hogging some. So I put
Oh,
two
yeah.
in so I get noise cancellation, and one of them doesn't even connect. I'm like, I have not used this enough for it not to work. And then my Apple Watch wouldn't let me change the volume on it. So I was just having a
You were having it was bad technology day,
meltdown.
man.
Yes, I was. Like, what? So I've got to
Oh
find
my
my
gosh.
good earbuds. I don't know where I
Sounds
put them.
like it.
I'm afraid they fell out of my pocket somewhere.
I lost a fence charger in a pasture for a solid year and a half one time. Literally, I think I walked that field. I was like, it is here somewhere.
It's got to be
I
here.
couldn't find it. And then last summer we grazed through it the first time, and I was like, what?
Oh.
Esther. Hey, it
That's
still
great.
works. Year and a half later,
Oh,
man.
very
Covered by
good.
dirt, but it worked.
Yeah. Well, great. Yeah. My earbuds are waterproof, so if I can find them
Hope
out in the
springs
pasture, they ought to
eternal.
be okay. Yeah. We'll see. Our third question, Jessica. What would you tell someone just getting started?
Yeah. So I would say be gentle with yourself, right? The learning curve is steep. You're going to make mistakes, and try not to be too hard on yourself. Farming with animals, especially, even with crops, can be emotionally, hey, your whole crop got decimated by X, Y, and Z, or you lost a crap ton of chicken, or a bunch of lambs, or something happened. And so you're going to have those emotional kind of toils that you don't always expect either. And I think you just have to be like gentle with yourself.
I think that's excellent advice because I know for myself, I can be tremendously hard on myself.
Yeah.
And my wife is all the time, if I spend too long sitting down, and not that I'm always outgoing and stuff, but if I feel like I've sat down too long, I'm beating myself up about it. My wife is, you've got to rest. You can't just always be doing something. You've got to take downtime. So I'm trying to do that more. But yeah, you got to be gentle with yourself and understand you can't do everything.
Yeah.
I don't like that
true.
answer.
I know.
And lastly, Jessica, where can others find out more about you?
Yeah. So I don't do a very good job on my Instagram staying up to date, but I do like to post videos at times on Instagram. So you can find us on Southview Station on Instagram, or we do have a website, southviewstation.com. So you can always reach out. My email's on there. And so touch base. I'm really not on Facebook much for a few reasons, including some personal reasons. So, but feel free. Always happy to connect with people.
Very good. We will put those links in our show notes. Jessica, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing today about your sheep. We didn't even get to your cattle or other things.
True. Thanks so much, Cal. It was amazing.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, Jessica. Yeah, I was sitting here on my notes, and I'm like, I didn't even get to cattle, and I wanted to talk about cattle a little bit because I think, did you say, or I saw somewhere you have Dexter cross cattle?
I do. Yep, I do. So, yep, I've got about 10 head of Dexter cattle. Well, I've done a little bit of everything. I had some red poll. I had some Angus that I had switched over and did. I like Dexter because I like they're small to get with.
Oh, yeah.
Like sheep sensing better and just management.
I imagine so.
So, but most of them right now are crosses. So they're like an Angus Dexter cross. It's nice. I've got a couple Hereford cross calves out of the Dextery cross heifers. But I agree with you. Been looking at that general like body type that just loves to eat grass. And, you know, the cows, man, if I had enough acreage The cows make a lot of sense as far as like their ease on the grass. They just grow and get fat like nobody's business. But it's more to winter. And I don't know about you. I don't know how you run like your cattle, but for us at least, like it's in order to do really good grass-fed beef, like I think you have to do 2 years. You really need pretty dang close to 2 years. And up here, at least with the winters, it's hard not to feed enough hay. Like we get wet snow that just, and I don't have enough land to leave enough standing for enough residue to not have to feed hay right now. That's just my reality. And so it's really, it's too expensive. In all honesty, like I'd have to charge basically like $9 a pound beef to really make a good profit on beef. So I do keep some cows. We like eating beef. I do sell some beef that I have left, but I don't feel like I can really grow the beef, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah. Well, your winters are tougher than our winters are. I really hope you enjoyed today's conversation. I know I did. Thank you for listening. And if you found something useful, please share it. Share it on your social media. Tell your friends. Get the word out about the podcast. Helps us grow. If you happen to be a grass farmer and you'd like to share about your journey, go to grazinggrass.com and click on Be Our Guest. Fill out the form and I'll be in touch. We appreciate your support by sharing our episodes and telling your friends about it. You can also support our show by buying our merch. We get a little bit back from that. Another way to support the show is by becoming a Grazing Grass Insider. Grazing Grass Insiders enjoy bonus content, monthly Zooms, and discounts. You can visit the website, grazinggrass.com, click on support, and they'll have the links there. Also, if you haven't left us a review, please do. It really helps us as people are searching for podcasts. And I was just checking them, and we do not have very many reviews for 2024. So if you haven't left us a review, please do. And until next time, keep on grazing grass.